Hello everyone. Welcome everyone to the channel Strange Night Podcast. Episode 1. The 3 a.m. Dial Tone. A dilapidated old apartment building in Chicago, notorious for its early 20th century immigrant residence and antiquated wiring telephone system, Ethan is a night shift telephone technician for a major telecommunications company, tasked with troubleshooting and fixing landlines in Chicago's older buildings. He is a pragmatic man who only believes in things that can be measured by electrical circuits. One night, he receives an emergency call from a rundown apartment complex in Wicker Park. The phone lines on the entire 7th floor are experiencing interference and consistently ring at the exact same time. 3:07 a.m. Strangely, when the call is answered, all anyone hears is a long dial tone, as if someone is holding down a button, and a cold breath. Ethan takes his equipment up to the attic, where the old phone lines run like a complex, tangled network of dead veins. As he begins to inspect the main junction box for the 7th floor, the needle on his voltage meter jumps erratically, nearly maxing out, even though there is no significant current flowing. He smells a musty odor, like decades of decaying newspaper and dust. Then, exactly at 3:07 a.m., the phone ringing starts simultaneously from all the apartments. Ethan, wearing a headset, plugs his listening device directly into the line. Instead of the familiar dial tone, he hears a terrifying sound. A quick, classic rotary dial sequence, followed by a hoarse, distorted voice repeating one phrase. "I'm sorry, the number you have reached is not in service." He recalls an old urban legend about a girl who lived in the complex in the 1950s. She was murdered at the ground floor public payphone while trying to call the police. Her spirit is supposedly trapped, unable to complete her final call. Ethan decides to run a test. He disconnects the building's main telephone line. Theoretically, no phone should be able to ring or make any sound. He checks his watch. 3:15 a.m. Everything is silent. He lets out a sigh of relief, but then a sound begins to emerge from his own headset. It's not a telephone ring, but the sound of someone manually cranking the rotary dial of an old crank phone. The sound is coming from inside the disconnected line. Horrifyingly, he hears someone trying to speak. This time, it's not the distorted voice, but a desperate, clear woman's voice, pleading for help. "Please, I can't hang up. I'm trapped. They're coming." The pleading is abruptly cut short by the dry, crisp sound of wire cutters and the woman's final, desperate scream. Immediately after, the same distorted voice from earlier speaks up, this time directed straight at Ethan through the headset, cold and slow. "The number you have reached has been reconnected to us." Ethan tears the headset off, noticing the earpiece has melted plastic. When he turns back to look at the junction box, all the lines are severed. But from inside the empty box, the rhythmic, steady sound of dialing can still be heard. It is no longer just an echo. It is an entity trying to dial out. And it knows Ethan's number. Ethan bolts from the attic. The next morning, he resigns. As he drives out of Chicago, his cell phone starts to ring. The screen shows an unfamiliar number, 307-307-3000. He doesn't answer, but as the call ends, he receives a voicemail. He opens it, and all he hears is a long dial tone, the sound of that cold breath, and then the voice. "I'm sorry, the number you have reached." Episode 2. The Lost Gold Prospector's Trail. The Sierra Nevada mountains, California. A remote area with abandoned gold mines dating back to the 19th century gold rush. Liam and Ben are two friends passionate about exploration and history. They embark on a 3-day trek deep into the Sierra Nevada range to find the forgotten trails of the old prospectors. On the second day, they find a small cave hidden by brush and rocks. Inside, they discover a rotten iron box. Within the box is a diary wrapped in animal hide, belonging to a prospector named Elias Vance, written in 1852. Elias wrote about finding a massive vein of gold, but it wasn't ordinary gold. He described it as black gold, a heavy, dark metal that glowed faintly like candle wax. The early pages were full of excitement, but as they read on, Elias's tone shifted to desperation. August 15th. This black gold is not like gold. It brings a coldness. I cannot touch it without feeling my flesh freeze. August 18th. I hear rustling in the dark. It is not a bear. It is tracking me. It wants my black gold. It wants it so badly. It is mimicking my voice to call me out of the cave. Liam and Ben scoff, assuming it's paranoia fueled by isolation and starvation. The diary leads them to the location Elias was mining, an abandoned shaft. They find the mine entrance where a rotten wooden plank is nailed up, bearing a message carved in dried blood. The hunter is here. Ignoring the warning, driven by greed and curiosity, they enter. As they go deeper, they notice the temperature drops unnaturally, and the air becomes heavy. The light from their headlamp seems to be absorbed by the rock walls. Ben begins to feel uneasy and suggests turning back. "This place is wrong," he says. Liam, still fixated on the black gold, replies, "Wait a minute. The diary says it's right here." Just then, a voice echoes from the dark corner of the mine shaft. "Liam, come back here." The voice is Ben's, but it's deeper and has a strange resonance, as if coming from a very deep tunnel. Liam looks at Ben, who is standing right next to him, his face pale. "Did you just say something?" Ben stutters. I didn't say anything. That was an echo." "No, an echo can't pronounce my name that clearly." Liam tenses up. Then a terrifying sequence of events unfolds. Their headlamps flicker and die, plunging them into absolute darkness. Scraping sounds start emanating from the rock walls around them. Not the sound of falling rock, but claws on metal. They hear Ben's voice again, this time very close, right behind Liam. "You can't hide it, Elias." The real Ben screams in terror. "That's not me! Something is here! It's mimicking me!" They start running towards the exit. Liam trips and drops the diary. It falls open to the last page, where Elias wrote his final entry, August 22nd. "It has found me. It is not an animal or a demon. It is the shadow of avarice. It consumes those who crave what isn't theirs. It has taken my voice. It will take the voice of the hunter is here." Immediately, Liam hears Ben's voice, exactly Ben's voice, echoing from the mine entrance. "Liam, the exit is here! Hurry!" Liam knows his real friend, Ben, is behind him. He realizes the entity has succeeded in luring the real Ben out, and is now trying to lure Liam deeper in by using Ben's voice. Liam turns his back on the exit and runs into a side tunnel. He accepts he might get lost, but he can't follow that voice. Episode 2, Conclusion. Liam eventually crawls out of the mine through a small ventilation shaft after hours of scrambling. He looks around. Ben is nowhere to be seen. He tries his phone. No signal. He turns back to the mine, and next to the old wooden plank bearing "The Hunter is Here" is a fresh carving. The new hunter is here. He turns to walk away, but just then, his phone suddenly receives a voicemail notification. It's Ben. His voice is shaking, crying, "Liam, I've been outside all night. Where are you? Didn't you hear me calling you?" Liam realizes the voice he heard inside the mine wasn't the entity trying to lure him in, but a warning from the dead Ben, who was caught by the entity and used its voice to call Liam out of the mine, where he was safe. Liam had misinterpreted everything. He looks back at the mine. The scraping has stopped. Instead, a deep, raspy voice echoes from the shadowy depths. "Thank you for coming back, Elias." Or should I say, Liam. The Puritan family's cursed doll. A Puritan family museum house in Salem, Massachusetts, housing artifacts from the 17th century. Sarah is a young artifact restorer newly hired to work at the Redding Family History Museum. Her task is to prepare a special exhibit of personal items from the time of the Salem witch trials. In the storage room, Sarah finds an artifact carefully sealed in an oak box bound with iron chains, an antique porcelain doll, nearly the size of an infant. The doll's face is cracked, and its glass eyes are a striking green, staring in a disturbing way. The museum curator explains that the doll, named Abigail, belongs to the Redding family, but is not allowed for public display. According to legend, it was the last toy of a girl named Martha, who was executed for witchcraft in 1692. Before her execution, Martha cursed the doll, proclaiming that anyone who possesses it would have to relive her fear and face a witch trial of their own. Sarah doesn't believe in curses. She opens the box and begins the cleaning process. The moment she wipes the cracked face of the doll, she feels a rush of frigid air. From that night on, Sarah is plagued by terrifying dreams. In them, she sees herself standing on an interrogation platform, surrounded by angry Puritan faces, and forced to answer questions about her heretical behavior. The most terrifying part is, when she looks down, she sees she is holding the Abigail doll, and the doll itself is accusing her in a little girl's whispering voice. The hallucinations don't just happen during sleep. While working alone in the museum, Sarah starts seeing old portraits on the walls blink and whisper. She hears persistent knocking at the doors, but when she opens them, no one is there. One night, Sarah stays late to finalize the exhibit preparations. She places the Abigail doll on her work table. The museum's landline rings. When she answers, there's no voice, just a child's quiet sobbing and the loud, repeated sound of a hammer pounding. Frightened, Sarah decides to put the doll back in its box. As she sets it down, she realizes the horror. The cracks in the doll's face have spread into a distinct shape, the shape of a face screaming in agony. She hastily locks the doll back in chains. As she closes the lid, she sees a new message appear on the inside surface of the oak lid, carved with sharp fingernails. Your sin is doubt. Sarah realizes she has entered the doll's trial. The curse is not execution, but to be trapped in a state of eternal accusation and judgment by her own fear and conscience. She runs to the curator and confesses everything. The curator looks at her with cold, emotionless eyes. "You are speaking nonsense, Sarah. It is clear you are suffering from spiritual decadence, influenced by the devil, he says in a formal, old-fashioned voice, mimicking the Puritan language. Your trial will end when you declare your innocence before the spirit of little Martha. Sarah turns back to look at the Abigail doll sitting in the locked box. Suddenly, the box shakes violently, and the chains begin to unlock themselves. She knows that if she admits guilt, she will be sentenced and trapped by the spirit. But if she declares herself innocent, she will face its wrath. In desperation, Sarah yells, "I am innocent! I am not a witch!" The moment she speaks those words, the box flies open. There is no doll inside, only a piece of old paper written in faded ink. The text reads, "Verdict, not guilty. Consequence, condemned by those around you." The next morning, Sarah goes to work as usual. As she walks in, she sees the museum staff looking at her with looks of hatred. The curator informs her she is immediately fired for conduct inconsistent with the museum's moral standards. As Sarah leaves the building, she hears a child's giggle echoing from within. She turns to look, and in the attic window she sees the Abigail doll sitting there, the cracks on its face completely gone, smiling and waving goodbye. Sarah escaped the doll's curse, but was instead condemned and isolated by the trial of the people around her. Episode 4. The Call from the Louisiana Swamp. The deep bayou of Louisiana, where muddy waterways intersect with cypress trees and dense fog. Joseph is an experienced alligator hunter. He and his teenage son, Remy, are steering their flat-bottomed boat into an area of the swamp local people call Alligator's Eye, an area forbidden for hunting, known for its eerie silence and ghostly mysteries. Joseph needs a large alligator to pay off a debt. Remy, meanwhile, is fascinated by stories of an ancient voodoo priestess, Madame Marie Laveau, who is said to have buried a treasure or a powerful totem in this area. As night falls, the fog begins to blanket the water, turning the cypress trees into silent, towering ghosts. Their boat gets stuck on a small mud mound. Just then, they hear it. It's the faint, weak sobbing of a lost woman, echoing from the depths of the swamp. The crying is full of grief and desperation. Seemingly only a few hundred yards away, Joseph, a tough man, tells Remy, "It's not our business. Who would be lost here at this hour? It's a wounded animal." But as they try to push the boat free, the crying suddenly turns into a lullaby sung in old Creole French, a haunting and sorrowful tune. The melody sounds very close, and Joseph sees Remy start to become mesmerized, attempting to step into the water to move towards the sound. "Don't! That's the La Llorona of the bayou," Joseph whispers, pulling Remy back with all his strength. The singing makes them forget their original purpose. They no longer think about alligators or treasure. They only have one thought in their minds. They must find the woman to help her. They turn off their flashlights and rely only on the faint moonlight. They begin to walk through the tangled cypress roots, heading toward the singing. As they go deeper, the forest becomes denser and wetter. But the strange thing is that they no longer see any insects or animals. The swamp is completely silent, except for the song. Finally, they reach a clearing. There is a small mound with an old, lightning-struck cypress tree, and at the base of the tree is an ancient voodoo altar made of animal bones, silver ribbons, and a worn wooden mask. And the singing is coming from there. There is no woman. Instead, the altar is shaking gently, and the lullaby is emanating from the wooden mask itself with its empty eye sockets. Joseph and Remy freeze. Suddenly, the singing stops. The fog thickens, and a massive black shadow quickly glides past their vision. Joseph picks up a stick and yells, "Who's there?" At this moment, from all sides, 100 voices, women's, men's, and children's, all chime in. "We are here, son of Laveau." Joseph realizes the weeping woman was not a victim, but the guardian of an ancient tomb, and the singing was merely a trap to lure in trespassers. All the voices around them are the spirits of those who were tricked and trapped here. The father and son turn and flee back toward the boat. As they run, they hear the water being churned violently behind them. They don't look back, but they know it's not an alligator. When they reach the boat, Joseph tries to start the engine, but it won't turn over. Remy looks out at the water and sees a huge black shadow moving toward them, gliding on the surface rather than swimming. Right then, the lullaby starts up again, this time right next to the boat. Joseph looks down into the water and sees the wooden mask floating up. It has no body, but from its empty eyes, a faint green light shines directly at him. Joseph feels an invisible hand squeezing his heart. He hears a voice echoing in his mind. But it's not the song, it's a declaration. "You promised never to return. Now you are mine, Joseph." The next morning, the flat-bottomed boat is found empty, drifting on a bayou channel far from the alligator's eye area. Police find Remy's barefoot footprints in the mud. But for Joseph, they only find an old shirt caught on a cypress branch. On it, embroidered by hand, is a name: Laveau. Joseph was not a lost alligator hunter. He was a descendant of Madame Marie Laveau, who had once vowed to guard this swamp, but fled. And the weeping woman's cry was not a plea for help, but an ancient curse, calling the air back to take her place. Episode 5, The Ghost Tanker of Gettysburg. The historic Gettysburg battlefield in Pennsylvania, specifically the area where the famous Pickett's Charge took place. Professor Alan Thorne is a renowned Civil War historian and a staunch skeptic of supernatural phenomena. He arrives at Gettysburg to investigate a strange occurrence: continuous reports of heavy tank engine noise and metal tracks churning the ground on moonless nights. This is impossible, as tanks had not been invented during the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863. Allen sets up camp near Devil's Den, a rocky, jagged area famous for its intense paranormal activity. He outfits his camp with the most advanced audio recording and seismic sensor equipment, determined to prove that the sounds are merely echoes from the nearby highway or modern farming vehicles. The first night is completely silent. The second night, also unremarkable. Allen begins to feel disappointed and overly confident. On the third night, at 2:47 a.m., his recording equipment suddenly springs to life. It's not just engine noise. It's the sound of a heavy diesel engine, accompanied by the screech of metal tracks grinding against the soft soil. Allen's seismic sensors register massive vibrations, as if an object weighing over 60 tons is moving. Allen grabs his night vision binoculars and scans the dark field where Pickett's charge occurred. Thick fog covers the ground, but he can clearly see 2 fresh tracks of mud, the exact size of tank tracks, plowing through the historic lawn. As he focuses his binoculars on the end of the tracks, Allen sees it: a tank. It is not a Civil War-era tank. It is a modern main battle tank, painted in digital camouflage. It is sitting silently, its engine still rumbling softly. But it looks bizarrely old, rusty,
and strangely weathered by time, as if it has been there for centuries. Alan is terrified, but the historian in him takes over. He runs closer, trying to find signs of an elaborate hoax or a secret military exercise. As he approaches, he hears voices emanating from inside the tank. It is panicked yelling in an unrecognizable language, neither English nor any language he knows. A moment later, something starts glowing from within the tank, a brilliant yellow as if it is melting. Alan realizes this is not a trapped ghost. This is a traumatic time displacement event. The tank and the soldiers inside were flung back into the past and are permanently trapped at Gettysburg, constantly reliving their moment of temporal disruption. As the yellow light reaches its peak, the tank's turret slowly swivels toward Alan. A distorted, horrible sound, like metal being torn, blasts from the tank's external speaker. And then it speaks. Not in the strange language from before, but in the clear, desperate voice of an American soldier. "Help! We're stuck in the year 1863. We don't belong here. Please don't let us." The moment the soldier pleads, the tank suddenly fades away. The engine noise reduces to a static hiss, then vanishes completely, leaving behind only the deep track marks on the ground and the smell of burnt diesel fuel. Alan is stunned. He checks his recording equipment. The soldier's final plea was not recorded at all. He returns to his campsite. On the table, next to his laptop, is a small object that wasn't there before. An empty shell casing, made of a strange alloy, belonging to neither a modern nor a historical weapon. Alan leaves Gettysburg at dawn. Weeks later, while researching old archives of the Battle of Gettysburg, he finds a report written by a Confederate sergeant immediately after Pickett's charge. In it, the soldier describes, "That night I saw a huge, hideous iron machine. It moaned and hissed like a demon. There were men inside, but their faces were filled with the horror of the future. I swear to God, before it vanished, it shot out a fierce spark and left behind a piece of burning metal, like a warning. Leave the past alone, or the future will come to claim it." Professor Allen places the strange metal casing he found onto the copy of the old report. They belong together. He realizes the phenomenon wasn't a ghost. It was a wounded future trying to warn the past. And he has become the sole possessor of the evidence of this temporal warfare. Episode 6, The Black Lake and the Devil's Contract. A deep, bottomless, dark lake in the Midwest, surrounded by birch trees. It is known as Black Lake because no one can see its bottom, and the water is always charcoal-colored. Elias is a talented guitarist struggling with his career. He has spent 10 years trying to achieve fame, but he always seems to lack that magical spark needed to truly connect with the audience. After being kicked out of his band, he falls into despair. He recalls local legends about the Black Lake. It is said that deep beneath the dark water resides an ancient entity, not the devil, but the dream collector, who trades talent, luck, or wealth to souls who have given up all hope in exchange for a portion of their life's light years. Ignoring the warnings, Elias goes to the lake at midnight, carrying his old guitar. He stands on the shore, looking into the still water. "I know you're there," Elias whispers. "I want talent. I want people to listen to me. I'm willing to pay the price." The lake's surface suddenly ripples, even though there is no wind. A thick black mist rolls up from the center of the lake, forming a tall,
vague human figure on the water. There are no words, only a deep, quiet sound, yet echoing in Elias's head, asking, "What light of yours will you surrender to gain the spotlight?" Elias agrees without hesitation. He throws his old guitar into the lake as a covenant. The black shadow retreats. Elias returns home. The very next morning, he buys a new guitar. When he starts to play, magic happens. The music flowing from his fingertips is enchanting and flawless. He has the spark he craved. Within months, Elias becomes a nationwide rock star. But this success comes at a cost. As he performs under the stage lights, he starts seeing strange things in mirrors. His reflection doesn't accurately mirror his actions. When he smiles on stage, his reflection in the mirror wears a scowling, angry, and terribly aged expression. Things get worse when he discovers that every time he plays a new hit, his reflection loses a bit of its vitality. One night, after a huge, successful concert, Elias looks into a large mirror in his dressing room. His reflection stares back at him. It is no longer Elias's image, but a haggard, skeletal version with completely empty eyes, as if its soul has been drained. And that reflection suddenly smirks. "Did you think you could cheat me, Elias?" The deep, resonant voice, like the one at the lake, comes from the reflection's mouth. "I didn't take your life. I took the part of your life you were meant to have in the light. The more famous you become, the faster I claim your light self." Elias understands the horrifying truth. The devil's contract wasn't to take his life. It allowed Elias to live, but only to exist as a shadow, while his bright, happy self was imprisoned by the dream collector at the bottom of the lake. As he performs his latest hit on TV, millions of fans cheer. But at that very moment, his image on the TV screen momentarily shifts. For a split second, it is not Elias, but the vague black shadow on the lake's surface. Elias, in despair, returns to the black lake. He stands on the shore and calls the dream collector. This time, the lake doesn't ripple. There's only a small snap. Elias looks down. A tiny piece of mirror has cracked off his new guitar, falling into the water. Elias screams in desperation, but there is no answer. He returns home and plays his guitar one last time. The music he plays is a painful, horrifying melody. When he looks at any reflective surface, windows, phone screens, even his manager's eyeglasses, he sees that he no longer has a reflection. His self has been completely drained. Weeks later, Elias disappears from the public eye. Critics say he lost his spark and became soulless. In the final shot, the black lake is shown. Beneath the dark water, an old guitar rests at the bottom. On its wooden surface, the perfect, radiant reflection of a happy man is smiling, trapped there forever. Episode 7. The Secret of the Abandoned Texas Church. A small, old wooden church, abandoned since the 1940s, located deep in the harsh desert land of West Texas. Ava, an independent paranormal investigator, and her cameraman Mike decide to infiltrate the abandoned Trinity Church. The place is not known for ghosts, but for rumors of heretical cults and strange ceremonies held for decades after the church officially closed. They arrive at sunset. The white-painted wooden church is faded under the Texas sun, looking lonely and decayed. The stained glass windows are shattered, but inside, the sanctuary appears strangely intact. As they step in, they smell a pungent, indescribable odor. Not dust, but ancient incense and dried blood. They start setting up infrared cameras. Ava notices inconsistencies. The altar has no cross, but a tattered leather book lying open. The pews are arranged in a spiral pattern toward the altar, rather than in straight rows as usual. As Mike films a close-up of the book, he discovers handwritten characters inside. They are not Latin or Greek, but English, written backward from right to left, and the content consists of bizarre and gruesome prayers, completely contrary to any Christian doctrine. Ava dubs it the inverted invocation. They proceed to investigate the small room behind the sanctuary. There they find a series of crude wooden figurines, roughly the size of a child, lined up against the wall. These statues look like children covering their ears and staring wide-eyed. When Mike tries to lift one of the statues, he cries out. The statue is not fixed, but it feels like it is clinging to the floor itself. When he finally pulls it free, there is a layer of wet mud underneath, and a weak moan emanates from the wooden floor. Ava realizes these statues are not decorative. They were placed there to listen and record the inverted prayers. When they return to the main area, Mike suddenly shivers. Ava, that statue. The statue closest to the altar that they had seen earlier is now facing the door, even though it was facing the wall before. They are terrified, but decide to continue filming. They realize this church is not haunted by the dead. It is occupied by distorted living spirits, a cult that has used it as their energy center. Ava walks up to the altar and reads aloud a passage from the inverted invocation by reading from right to left. Our Father, grant us the darkness. Grant us the truth in lies. Grant us the everlasting ending. Immediately, all the wooden statues in the side room begin to move in unison. They slowly turn their heads and direct their empty faces toward Ava, as if they had been waiting for this call. More horrifyingly, Mike turns the lens toward the book, and he sees the wooden altar is sweating. A dark, thick red liquid, like fresh blood, is seeping through the wood and dripping onto the floor. From deep beneath the church foundation, a voice not made of vocal cords echoes. It's not a scream, but a low, slow, powerful welcome. You have read. You have opened the door. You have invited us in. Ava realizes that by reading the invocation, they completed a part of the ritual. They are not ghost hunters. They are summoners. They run for the exit, but when Mike looks back, he sees all the wooden statues have left the side room. They are lined up in the main aisle, blocking the way out. And in the hand of each statue is a small stone hammer, just like the sound Sarah heard in episode 3. Ava and Mike escape the church by smashing a window. As they drive away from the area, they look back. The church is enveloped in a dark red light emanating from within. The next day, when they review the footage, the scene inside the church is clear, but all the sounds, the moans, the hammering, the welcome, have been replaced by a continuous, high-pitched humming coming from the camera itself. And when they listen closely, they realize the humming is not static. It is hundreds of voices whispering in unison, repeating one phrase. One of you will stay. Ava and Mike realize the cult is not just in Texas. They have implanted something into their footage, and they are connected. They both know that one of them will soon have to return to that church to take the place of one of the wooden statues. Episode 8. The Brooklyn Killer's Clock.
a pre-war rented apartment in Brooklyn, New York, which served as a boarding house in the 1980s. Elena is a meticulous freelance journalist specializing in cold cases. She moves into a spacious Brooklyn apartment, drawn by the affordable rent and the building's architectural history. In the living room, she finds a large, old, non-functional grandfather clock left behind by the previous tenant. It stands silently, like a wooden tombstone. Elena quickly becomes engrossed in a cold case from the 1980s, the Timekeeper. This serial killer was never caught and was famous for his modus operandi, method of operation. He always stopped every clock in the victim's room at the exact moment the murder occurred. She notices the anomaly. The grandfather clock in her room is consistently stopped at 3:17 a.m., the identified time of the Timekeeper's first murder. Elena researches the building's records and uncovers a horrifying truth. Her apartment was the scene of that very first murder. From then on, the nightmare begins.
Every night,
Exactly at 3:17 a.m., the grandfather clock suddenly ticks once, the dry sound echoing in the silent apartment. Immediately after the tick, Elena experiences an intense sensory flash from the past. She smells the pungent, cheap perfume of the 80s. She hears the distant sound of a struggle and metal dropping, and a sense of extreme fear that is not her own washes over her. She tries to remove the clock, but every time she touches it, a cold current runs through her. After many sleepless nights, Elena uncovers a small detail in the police file that no one noticed. The Timekeeper didn't just stop clocks. He meticulously wound them backward to a fixed moment, 3:17 a.m. That leads Elena to a chilling discovery. During one startled awakening at 3:17 a.m., she rushes to the bathroom. In the moment the clock ticks, she looks into the mirror and sees a reflection is moving backward in time. She sees herself automatically pouring coffee back into the sink, stepping backward out of the bedroom door, and her face shows a panic she hasn't felt. The clock is not just a reminder. It is a temporal anchor, preserving the perfect moment of the crime. One night, exactly at 3:17 a.m., the clock doesn't tick. Instead, Elena hears the mainspring being rewound, the sound emanating from inside the wooden case itself. The scent of cheap perfume and panic overwhelms her. She looks in the mirror. Her reflection is no longer her, but the image of the first victim, pale with terror, looking over her shoulder. Through the reflection, the victim silently warns, "He is rewinding to get it right this time." Elena turns around. In the darkness of her apartment, she sees a tall, vague, shadowy figure holding a pocket watch. He is walking backward toward her. He is rewinding the moment of the crime, and Elena is his new target. Elena screams, using all her strength to push the grandfather clock over. The clock shatters into pieces. The shadow vanishes. Elena packs her bags and moves out. The Timekeeper case remains cold. Inside the wreckage of the clock, she finds a tiny old key hidden in a secret mechanism. Weeks later, Elena is in her new apartment. She receives a package. Inside is a brand new, expensive, antique pocket watch. This watch is also stopped at 3:17 a.m. She tries to open it, but it requires a special key. She realizes the small key she found in the old grandfather clock perfectly fits the lock. A note falls out of the package. It is written in elegant script. "Thank you for fixing my toy, Elena. Rewinding a clock, you know,
is always harder than just stopping it. The new pocket watch starts ticking, but the ticks are backward. Kit, kit, kit. Elena looks in the mirror. Her reflection begins to walk backward out of the room, leaving her alone, facing the future, while her past is being claimed.
Episode 9. The Botanical Garden Grown from Corpses.
The Nightingale Botanical Garden in Oregon, an old private garden famous for its bizarre, unclassifiable plant species. Dr. Clara Reese is a botanist specializing in plant genetics. She receives a grant to study the Nightingale Botanical Garden, a vast, ancient garden established in the 19th century by an eccentric botanist named Silas Nightingale. Silas Nightingale was famous for claiming to have found the formula for eternal life through plant life. His garden features flowers and trees with almost surreal colors and shapes, flourishing robustly and never wilting, even in harsh winters. Clara spends days taking soil and tissue samples. She notices a major anomaly. The chemical composition of the soil in the Nightingale Garden doesn't match any soil type in the region. It is incredibly rich in a complex compound based on bone and marrow, yet shows no typical signs of organic decomposition.
She finds Silas Nightingale's old diary buried in an abandoned greenhouse.
The pages speak not of chemical fertilizers, but of the confluence of light and ashes and the need for willing donors. One diary entry reads, "Plants do not require water. They require memory, and memory is found in the ashes of the forgotten." A chill runs down Clara's spine. She immediately has the soil samples analyzed and discovers the horrifying truth. The soil is nourished by human cremated remains, but not just simple ashes. It's bone and tissue processed with a special plant enzyme, creating an endless nutrient source. Silas created this garden by using the remains of dozens of homeless and forgotten people. As Clara rushes out of the garden, trying to carry her specimens, she begins to inhale a large amount of pale yellow pollen from the strange flowers. Immediately, she starts seeing strange things. She sees vague, blurred figures of old men and women wandering among the flower beds, gently caressing the leaves. They are not ghosts, but the dead, whose memories and images are retained by the plants through the pollen. Clara sees an elderly man standing under a juniper tree. He looks at her and says in a sorrowful voice, "Don't go. Look, I am flourishing." Clara realizes the pollen is hallucinogenic, but its true purpose is worse. It makes the living want to become part of the garden by making them envious of the eternal life the plants possess. She is so mesmerized that she stops and starts digging the soil. She almost wants to surrender herself to the garden. Just then, a tall, gaunt shadow steps out from the bushes. It is the spirit of Silas Nightingale, not protecting the garden, but guarding the secret of the loneliness he created. Silas looks at Clara and speaks in a whisper, yet full of authority. "You have seen my secret. Now, you must be its queen. Your ashes will create the brightest red." Clara tries desperately to escape the garden. She steps on a flower bush and a massive cloud of pollen rises. She collapses. She wakes up outside the garden gate, her body weary and exhausted. She sees her car, but all her samples and Silas's diary are gone. Weeks later, Clara lives in a state of obsession. She can find no physical proof, but she knows what she saw. She is haunted by the thought of going back to flourish forever. That night, Clara stands in front of the mirror. She coughs. When she holds out her hand, she sees a small patch of pale yellow pollen stuck to her fingertip. As she examines it closely, she realizes the pollen is not yellow. It is the shimmering gold of metal, and it begins to take root on her finger like a green hair. Clara knows she has brought the garden home. As she looks down at her hand, she sees her veins slowly turning a deep green. And then she hears a voice echoing from inside her own lungs. A soft, whispering, but powerful voice. She is mine. The tree shall sprout. Episode 10. The Radio Tower's Vow. An old abandoned FM radio transmission tower on an isolated hill overlooking a small town in Oregon near the Nightingale Botanical Garden. Sarah, new protagonist, is an electronics engineer with a passion for media history. She is seeking old equipment for a restoration project and discovers an abandoned FM radio transmission tower dating back to the 1970s, rumored to have been shut down after its last disc jockey vanished. Inside the station, everything is covered in dust. She finds the old studio. On the desk is a partially burned cassette tape and an old photo of the DJ, a gaunt, desperate-looking man named Arthur. Sarah begins to restore an old transmitter. She discovers a secret channel Arthur had used. This channel doesn't broadcast music or news. It only emits a very specific static noise frequency known as interference 307. When Sarah turns on the transmitter, the machine lets out a gruesome screech. She hears Arthur's voice on the old cassette tape. He is speaking into the microphone, not to broadcast, but to enact a curse. Arthur had failed in his broadcasting career. He made a deal with some entity, a frequency collector, for his words to be heard forever. In return, Arthur had to provide this entity with stories of despair and horror. And his vow was, "My story will never end, and I will broadcast it everywhere." As Sarah continues listening to the tape, she realizes the horrifying truth. Arthur didn't vanish. He became part of the very radio frequency itself. She looks at the old circuit diagram. It is not a standard transmitter. Arthur had attached a special device, a temporal anchor, to the transmitter, using the radio station as a conduit to transmit his emotions and events across America. All the horror events in the previous episodes were Arthur's stories, broadcast continuously via the interference 307 frequency. Episode 1, Dial Tone. Interference 307 was the source of the terrifying dial tone and the dialing sound at 3:07 a.m. Episode 3, Cursed Doll. This frequency amplified the sound of the hammer and the judgment from the Puritan figures. Episode 6, Black Lake. It was Arthur's curse that brought the dream collector, the timekeeper, to enact desperate contracts. Episode 8, Brooklyn Clock. Interference 307 kept the timekeeper's clock perpetually stuck at 3:17 a.m. Episode 9, Botanical Garden. The pollen amplified the despair of the trapped souls, encouraging Clara to flourish forever. Sarah realizes Arthur didn't want people to hear his voice, but to feel the horror he created. Sarah decides to disconnect the transmitter. She uses pliers to cut the main power cables. The moment the final cable is severed, all the lights in the studio go out. Complete silence reigns. Sarah breathes a sigh of relief. But then a sound starts emanating. It's not coming from the transmitter. It's coming from Sarah's own smartphone. She picks up the phone. The screen is black, but a faint blue light shines from inside the speaker. And then she hears Arthur's voice, no longer distorted or static, but clear and cold. I swore my story would never end. You thought you could cut the cables, but you listened to me. Sarah looks back at the radio station. The transmitter is still off, but she notices Arthur's blurred shadow is gone. She realizes the curse is no longer in the radio tower. It has been transmitted and downloaded into every electronic device, every recorder, every phone the listeners used to receive the interference 307 frequency. Arthur's voice speaks one last time, directly from Sarah's phone. Now, every listener is a small broadcasting tower, and my story will begin again. Sarah frantically throws her phone to the floor. The screen shatters, but immediately after, she hears a long dial tone. Then the sound of dialing from somewhere else. The final shot cuts to a close-up of the screen of the device, phone/computer, the YouTube audience is watching. The screen flickers slightly, and a pale yellow static frequency, like the pollen in episode 9 and the light in episode 5, flashes for a millisecond. A small voice, like a whisper stuck in the circuitry, is heard. Welcome to my new broadcast. Stay tuned and hear the whole story. Let it begin.